Stairs, isn't it? You have to. Oh, so you're
No, I brought my, because there's a problem logging in at home, which Jill passed on to Cloudy.
Yeah.
Because I switched it off before I went on holiday, because I didn't want to, drain the battery completely. And
It's not what it seems.
it hasn't worked since. Good man.
It's keeping the cold in or out. Not sure.
We all generate a kilowatt of heat.
Right, good evening councillors, Town Clerk. Welcome to this meeting of the Finance and General Purposes Committee, reconvened from last week. The meeting tonight is quorate, I'm pleased to say. So we shall go through the agenda. Item 1 is apologies for absence received.
Thank you, Chair. So you have apologies from Councillor Breen, travel commitment, Councillor Carter, the Mayor, work commitment, and Councillor Anderson, travel commitment.
Thank you. 2 is declarations of interest, to receive any declarations of disclosable pecuniary interest from members in respect of business to be transacted. Anything? Okay, thank you. Item 3 is minutes of the Finance and General Purposes Committee, to receive and approve the minutes of the Finance and General Purposes Committee held on the 18th of September, and to consider any matters arising from those minutes not covered elsewhere in this agenda. So anything on the first page, attachment 1? Anything on the second page? The allotments update, will the report be coming to the next meeting?
Yes, so there's been a further report to full council.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. The market update, the Bricante was successful, I think, on Sunday.
It was.
Indoors.
The same was.
Leaflets, I still need to speak to the property manager about that. Events on the forecourt is on this agenda. Page 3. Page 4. Telephone boxes, we have now started on the New Street box. We have another volunteer. Page 5. So, are we happy to receive and approve those minutes? All in favour?
I wasn't there.
Thank you. Item 4, public participation. A 20-minute session is set aside for members of the public to make representations at the meeting in respect of business on the agenda. Do we have any?
No request.
No requests. So item 5 is the payment schedule and finances. So these are items 5A to 5F. Attachments 2A to 2F. So for 5, read 2 in each case. I propose we just go through these one by one. So if we can start with 5A, which is 2A. So this is the expenditure transactions payments approval list. The purpose of these coming to this meeting is that we have a greater opportunity to make comments or observations or ask questions rather than them being done at full council. So first, 2A, expenditure transactions payments approvals, Councillor Black.
Yes, 1259, the Cinque Ports Confederation subscription. I mean, what do we get for this subscription? Because there's no publicity about anything like the Speaker's Day or any other ceremonial on their website. I mean, I would ask, is this something that we would wish to continue, and if so, why?
I think we're committed to that.
What do we get for it?
Do each of the 5 Cinque Ports pay an equal, or is it graded
Um,
to the limbs and so on?
I think it is equal, but I can find out for you. But what I would say is there is a new website that's just been
Yeah.
launched, and there is work going on. There's somebody working on that as we speak. We've all got to feed more details
see.
to them, and there's also a new Facebook page being launched, so there will be a greater presence going forward.
Well, that's good, because at the moment there's zero.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's all in progress.
Okay, so you're happy with 5A?
Yeah.
5B, attachment 2B is the payment schedule for mid-October. Is there anything on here that's...
I had one comment.
Michael?
Yeah, it's just line item 1296 relating to Acon Security Services Limited, and that was for the security at Speakers Day. And I've clarified with the finance officer regards the cost, whether this was the complete cost, and she's confirmed it has. So what I wanted to say was excellent value for money, and cuts across some of the
Negative?
Comments.
Comments away from the council that suggested other figures that were far in excess of this. So I'd just like to thank the town clerk and the team for negotiating a really good rate for the security that we had. There was a moving security that made sure everything was safe. Was
3 or 4 people?
5.
5.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add that event would not gone ahead without
No.
that.
Mm.
It would have been too dangerous, so
yeah.
it was absolutely necessary.
Mm.
We don't have the resource to manage rolling road closures.
No.
I think
Councillor Black?
It was just, I read the question, but I think it's been answered that. So, the town that has the speak is responsible for all security. It's not a pooled fund at all, when I take it.
No,
No.
each speaker's day, so every 7
Okay.
years it falls to a town to actually, deliver the event. So
Thank
all
you.
the expenditure is only every 7 years.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
just further to Councillor Sucre's comments about the feedback, the comments about the security on social media. I think there was a total lack of understanding of how much regalia and gold, what the actual risks were. I think they just weren't aware of the fact that people were, carrying very historic and
Yes.
valuable
Mm.
things on their person. So it was absolutely necessary. I just want to make
Yeah.
that point.
It's a good point.
Okay. 2C, paid expenditure transactions, that's 5C. There's nothing really on there. Happy with that? Next one is 2D, 5D, bank account reconcile statement. From September. Anything on here? Okay, happy with that?
Yep.
The next one is 2E, 5E, the financial statement, the cash book. This is the statement of receipts and payments between the 1st of April and the 30th of September, so 6 months. Starting with receipts. There was a question here about P22, which is, I understand, leaving.
Left.
Was
Left the building.
left. Whether the electricity charge will be reclaimed.
So the RFO is processing that.
Yeah, okay. Anything else on that first page? Receipts. No. Second page is payments. Anything on there? No. Third page, starting with 1600/3. Anything on there? No. And then page 4. So the closing balance is 588,810.55. So you're happy with those? Okay, the next one is the financial budget comparison. I think the RFO is planning to bring a paper to the next meeting with the progress of the budget year to date. So roughly 6 months review. 2F, that's 5F, financial budget. This is from 1st of April again till 30th of September. Is there anything on here anyone wishes to comment on? Question? No? Page 1, page 2. Page 3. And page 4. And page 5. And page 6. And finally page 7. Any comments? No? Happy with that? Okay.
Yeah. May I make
Yeah.
a comment generally, please? Obviously, the speakers thing only comes around once every 7 years, but in view of, it does of course have increased costs and so on. Is it something that we should be making a recommendation to the council to start putting a sinking fund together where contributions are made every year to it, so that it doesn't come as a big chunk in any one financial year? Is that legally possible? And secondly, is it financially sensible to do so?
I mean, you could do that. You could put £1,000 into the budget for every year. That's something that obviously the RFO and I will discuss. And if members want that, because that will come through the budget setting process. What I can tell you is we're still getting the invoices this week to finalise the, but we are definitely going to be underspent on the budget that was put aside, which was £7,000.
Yes, I thought it was about that.
Yeah, so there will be an underspend.
It looks better if you've already got a significant amount of that money banked, and that's the point I'm trying to make.
Sorry. It was budgeted for anyway. The budget's for the year. It's in the budget.
I know it's in the budget. I'm merely making a political point.
But taking the hit in 1 year.
Exactly.
I would be in favour of that.
Yeah,
I think it's much better to actually even out your expenditure, so you know what you can cover.
Well, it's a moot point because you're committing expenditure for something that doesn't happen. So you're just carrying it on from 1 year to
And
the next.
into another administration
Yeah,
period.
so is it worth it? I don't know, maybe the RFO could.
We do sort of have some advice.
I think with the Speakers' Day generally, we do, I mean, it was a fantastic spectacle. And I think we need a review at some point of successes and lessons learned, etc. It's probably not the place for that here, but certainly the budget was 7,000 and we've come in well under budget, so that's a good outcome.
And I just wanted to thank my team because
Yeah.
it was phenomenal, the
Effort.
effort and actually what we delivered on just a few resources was absolutely spectacular.
Well, I think one of the things we need to review is the amount of staff input that went into that.
Yes.
Because clearly it was a big team effort to make it happen. So item 5, we've looked at all of the payment schedules, etc. 5A to 5F. Are you happy to receive those?
Someone to propose.
I propose we receive those. Do we have a second? Second, Councillor Black. All in favour? Those are all received. Thank you. Next is item 6, Finance and Assets Working Group, attachment 3A, 3B, to receive and note a report from Councillor Schuker regarding the status of the Finance and Assets Working Group, to approve the recommendations, including the appointment of Councillor Peter Breen as chair of the working group, to approve the reduction in scope and to clarify the position in terms of governance for the role of the property manager.
So I'm happy to just give a very quick summary of what's included in the report. So The last time the working group met was on the 26th of September, and that was after quite a long period of hiatus in terms of it meeting. In light of the recent appointment of the property manager, we took the opportunity to review the terms of reference for the working group, and the purpose of that was to determine which elements should remain within the working group scope and which would naturally move across to the property manager as part of their role. Julian was involved in these discussions, he was in the meeting, so that was important that he was there. I won't go through the report line by line, I hope everybody's read it, but having discussed with Councillor Green, he's willing to take over the chair role. What that does, it helps distinguish between my role as chair of STBF Finance and the working group that supports and sits below it. Also, the terms of reference, the working group has been reduced significantly, and that is recognising the relationship between STC and the Tollbridge Fund. But what we want to keep included and the focus as we move over the next few months is to look at particularly the review of the Guildhall lease and that relationship between the two entities, STC and STBF. The remaining 4 bullets that are referenced in the terms of reference would move up to this committee level as part of its normal business. And what we also agreed in consultation with Julian is that he would still have the opportunity to attend the working group and share progress of what he's doing, but the key thing is it wouldn't be an additional governance step for him, avoiding him having to go through potentially 3 layers of governance to get a decision. So he will be consulted and he will come to consult the working group, but it will just be an opportunity to help and support him. So that's it in a nutshell. Councillor Miles has mentioned what decisions are required, and just replaying them. It's agreeing that a change of chair from myself to Councillor Green, that the scope of the working group is reduced to focus on only one of the original 5 bulleted purposes, and that recognising the fact that Julian will still have the opportunity to seek our views from the working group, but it will not be a governance step for him.
Okay, any comments, Councillor Black?
Yeah, could I just, I noticed I've moved on to the next one, which is 3B, which goes through the detail in section 1. Do we have any idea of a timescale to address the 4 items that would transfer to here? Because obviously it does mean an amount of work, and I'm just concerned that we're able to do that as well as all the other things that are required of the F&GP. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to have any discussions about that.
So we did, and what we recognise was that these become naturally at home within the committee. So it's not about handing across a package of work. It should be integrated as the normal business of this committee rather than at a lower level. So, for example, the deep dive activities, that really is a committee activity we recognise. Additional funding is something that really is a much later stage activity that probably falls to the property manager to progress, but would report into here in terms of any proposals he has as his first step in terms of governance. Then also there was the relationship, deep analysis, the assets, well that is part of his role.
Yes.
And we're already getting reports feeding through from him.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's anything there to answer your specific question, Councillor Black, is that there's a trigger point of something being handed across physically. Everything that we had done has been handed across to Julian and either been integrated in terms of what he's doing or replaced by what he feels is better to support him in his role.
Could I, Councillor?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I looked at this report and it seems to me to be very balanced. I do think it's really important for Bob to stop here and before he goes to main council, I think this committee has a really vital role to play in the coming months, probably years. And I think that clarification that's been put in there is very important and useful. I think it's important that Julian also knows where he stands and is given sufficient liberty to get on with his job.
Yeah.
So I support the proposal. Thank you.
I mentioned two things. One, the fifth bullet point there, fourth bullet point rather, about obtaining grant funding. Just to mention, we've recently set up, or people in the town have recently set up a Friends of the Empire Cinema group, and one of the roles I think they can take on, because they're going to be hopefully a very active group, is to investigate the possibility of grant funding for the cinema in particular. But obviously in doing that work it can tell us, you know, how things stand with other assets that we own, or the Tollbridge Fund owns. So that's one thing. But I think the first bullet point here is absolutely critical to this council, because we all agree things are much too complicated. We've been talking for the last 2 years about, you know, trying to simplify the arrangements between the Tollbridge Fund, the council, the museum fund, and all the rest of it. So that piece of work is critical to try to negotiate with Dover, to look at the lease and to try to improve the way that the council is structured in general. So I think focusing for the working group to focus on that piece of work is going to be critical. Otherwise they've spread too thinly and it can't be done. And now that Julian's in post, I think he can take on a lot of this work under the guidance of the Finance and General Purposes Committee. So, any other comments on this? So, if we move on to the recommendations, decision required. We're proposing that Councillor Peter Breen be elected as or appointed as the chair. All those in, can I propose that?
Yeah, I'd like to
And
say
second it. All those in favour of that? That's the first one. Second is that the scope of the working group be reduced to focus on the first bulleted purpose, which we've just talked about. So again, I'll be happy to propose that. If we have a seconder.
You second. I'll second it. No.
Councillor Batt will second. All those in favour? And finally, that Julian Daniels will still have the opportunity to seek the views of the working group in progressing of his work, but that this will not be an additional governance step in his seeking decisions from members of STC, STBF. So again, I'm happy to propose that. Do we have a seconder? All those in favour? So those decisions are all unanimously agreed. So thank you for the report. And we shall move on to the next item, which is item 7, guidance for events in the Guildhall Square. Attachments 4A and 4B. To receive and note a report from Councillor Shuker regarding guidance for events taking place in the Guildhall Square or forecourt. The conditions of hire for the Guildhall forecourt have been updated to reflect the discussion at the previous committee meeting held on the 18th of September. Members are invited to discuss and agree the changes to the conditions of hire and to recommend the adoption of the new conditions of hire decision required. So again, Annette, do you want to
so just very quickly, so at the last committee meeting we had a discussion around this, and I agreed to take out this one element of a much bigger piece, which is around, we need to look at the charging regime for next year. We also need to look at the way in which we've built the model for inside the Guildhall itself, and there are some issues there which I think need to be surfaced. So this focused solely on the forecourt and the need to make sure that the guidance, the conditions for hire were clear, robust, and actually didn't expose the council to unreasonable costs in terms of any events, be they non-profit making or they be profit making events. So what I did was, one of the reference points I used was the Dover District Council guidance for the hire of their land. So there was a very helpful piece of work they've already done on conditions of hire for their owned land. So I could use that as a reference point. But what I needed to do was make sure that the guidance reflected the sentiment around the basically all events this year, regardless of whether they were non-profit or were profit-based, all bar one, had resulted in some form of damage that the council, in effect, because the conditions were probably too weak, would have to take up the cost for it. So if you roll that up, the forecourt really needs a deep clean. A cost has been given by a professional company who have been used by DDC, and the cost of a professional clean for the forecourt is £2,800. To do that, and whether we have that presented as a proposal at some point, that would take away all income that we've earned from the forecourt this year. So the way of handling that is the proposal that I've included is that we take a deposit for each hirer for events, and that deposit, on the basis that if there is no damage that's occurred that would incur a cost of the council, then they get back their full deposit. But also within the guidance, it also talks about making sure that matting is put down, and I think that's the greatest risk area, is either cars leaking, and they did, or cooking facilities leaking, and they did. So some simple steps, if they're adhered to by any hirer, then there won't be any damage. And then the other thing is, of course, making sure that electricity that is used is paid for. Up to this point, we haven't been in control of that, but we've now got the ability to measure the usage of electricity. So for 25/6, we would charge where electricity is used, and not every event uses council electricity. So that's it in a nutshell. I have to take challenges about it, because I'm sure there are challenges along the way.
Is the meter directly just for the forecourt?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, a check meter.
So the 28 days, I can envisage a situation where there might be a kind of standoff if it's not paid. Do you then cancel the event, or there's a kind of negotiation going on?
So I think that's a really good point, Councillor. We had a situation this year of one event that booked in advance, then went completely quiet, or chased by the officers, and then actually came out of the woodwork well close up to the actual event day. I think it was possibly within a week or 2 weeks before the event itself. We can't have that in terms of making sure our staff are available, making sure that we don't lose the opportunity for another booking. All reasonable things. I don't think there's anything unreasonable in this, but that's my personal view.
Yeah, it's a robust approach, especially when there has been abuse, and we're well aware of one particular event where there was damage and abuse of the building.
Yeah, malicious damage, not just accidental damage.
Mr. Black?
Well, I think Vicky was,
Sorry.
It's fine. It's just a question really. Is that level of cleaning, is it necessary or just desirable for aesthetics? Is it something that...
I think it's more likely that the aesthetics, but at the end of the day, we signed off, we haven't even signed off ownership of the forecourt yet, and it already looks like it's been well lived in.
I suppose what I'm wondering is it, I know you can mitigate against further damage, but is that quite, the damage, was it kind of, it wasn't a one-off event, it was kind of a likely side effect, if you know what I mean, and it's going to recur unless we put measures in place to avoid it. So it was just oil from the car or something like that,
they were
enough
the
to
key.
stain and
In terms of the forecourt, the damage really was oiled, either cooking oil or car spillage. And you know, we had 2 cars at the front at one event, and neither had protection, and one of them leaked. So you know, these are simple things that any event organiser should really take responsibility for, in my opinion.
59 caddies, unique.
Yeah.
Can I just, I'm sorry, I'm always the pedant, I know. It's the Scottish education system does it to you. It's really more a stylistic thing. If you look at statutory requirements and insurance, the third paragraph, and also the same issue is in the third paragraph as the area of Guildhall Square forecourt. We've gone from the third person to the second person. We've gone from the higher to suddenly becoming you. And it doesn't look, I suggest, quite as professional as the rest of the document is. It's just a minor change, but I would suggest you might have a quick look at that.
Which paragraph, sorry?
It's paragraph 3. It says, please note the completion of the booking form does not constitute confirmed booking until you receive a confirmation the booking remains provisional. And then the next one is, the hirer must be aware they may be required to share the Guildhall with them. You must be courteous of all the users and all users of the building. I just suggest you keep it all in the third person. It's a minor point.
That's fine.
And I'll just check whether the town clerk's able to do that rather than me having to dig out documents.
I'm struggling to find.
Yes, I'm
Okay.
Sorry.
All right.
Which point?
It's paragraph 3.
Jill, it's there. That's
Conditions of hire.
Yeah.
Statutory requirements.
it's that one.
I'll write back there, sorry.
So
I'll
just
raise
replace you with the higher.
Yeah, and similarly in the area of the Guildhall Square forecourt, in the third paragraph there.
That's reasonable.
Can I just come to 19?
Sorry, councillor, can you just show me that again, please? So person instead of.
Well, whatever word you want to use,
Okay.
you're just moving from the second person to the third person.
The higher.
It's the Latin training I had, you see.
Can I just come to 19, charity or community events? Evidence will be required such as charity registration or community status registration, such as CIC or CIO. Now we know that many of the events are not of that
Yep.
status.
That is separate from this. So this is the conditions of hire that we already agreed.
Okay.
But what we did was we gave a dispensation to certain organisations on the basis that we want to revisit it now
Yeah.
in terms of what we wanted to do for next year.
So this will be in place from April.
Alongside everything else that needs to be wrapped around it. So if you remember, Councillor Miles, we agreed that we would tackle the whole bundle for November. This was done a month earlier.
Okay.
So it triggers the conversation about who's going to pick up the other responsibilities, which are looking at the relationships of certain organisations, and then all the other guidance, because we've only got now 4 weeks between this meeting and the next meeting.
Question. Number 14, cancellation of the hire. They only mentioned they have to give 48-hour notice. If they only says if so the town council are not liable for hire. So does that mean they not get the money back and the deposit back? Because they have to pay both, isn't it? If they give notice less than 48 hours, they're not
The
going to.
hire which is cancelled.
Yeah. It only says that. Yeah. 40 hours.
In both these circumstances, no refund of the high fee will be made.
High fee, but what about deposit? They don't get deposit. But see, the point of deposit is also yes. So those two you're not going to refund anyway. Anywhere else you're hiring.
Take advice from the town
Yes,
clerk
so
on this
do
in
you
terms of
put
the
it more
process.
clear?
So if the event doesn't happen, the deposit would be returned
Yeah,
because the event hasn't
No,
taken
I'm
place.
talking about
But the higher fee,
Yeah.
I think,
Not being
Yeah.
you're quite within your rights to say it's not
Yes.
returned because all the provisions will be in place for staff and everything. So I think you know you're fully entitled to say that the action.
Yeah, no, I think it's both not be refunded because you hire anywhere.
No,
If they
no.
cancel,
No, the deposits
No.
for.
The deposit is a
Yeah.
insurance
Yes.
against damage.
Yes, you
It's
can't.
not a deposit
No,
for
that's
the
okay.
booking.
Yeah.
Alright, so that's
Yeah.
different, because
Yeah.
I'm honest, when I book somewhere else, if
No.
I decide to cancel within 40
Yeah,
hours.
it's a retainer and the
Yeah.
guidance is,
Okay. You're
Yeah.
the
goes
police
into enough
for insurance.
detail
Okay,
about
that's
it being linked to the
Yeah.
survey before
Mm,
the event and then a survey after to then judge.
now I understand, okay, fine, thank you.
So whether it's less than or more than 48 hours, they don't get the
The higher.
higher fee back.
Mm.
Is that what that's saying?
If it's less than 48 hours,
Yeah,
they
and
won't
that,
get it
I
back.
read that as meaning if you're more than 48 hours, if you give notice more than 48 hours, then you could have the fee refunded. But
Yes.
if you're later than 48 hours or later, that's,
You don't get
yeah,
any
you
higher.
forfeit your fee because it's too close to the
Yeah,
event.
you
Yeah.
can't get some,
But if it's 49 hours,
Then
it's
then
alright,
they
yes.
get the money back, but you can't find anyone else to, you've lost.
Yeah,
And that's life.
That was carried forward from the existing
Yeah.
guidance, so if we feel that that's not robust
Yeah.
that's
enough, we'll
enough, is
that's
absolutely
it.
enough. Is anyone else need it?
Mm.
Normally a week notice, really need a week notice, really. Where you work, I work.
I mean, you would need 8 weeks' notice to try and find another user.
Yeah.
presumably.
I need 2 weeks, where am I
Yes,
working,
yes,
you
you'd
know?
struggle, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
In theory, if you wanted to find another hirer,
yeah.
not that we necessarily can find another hirer, if
Yeah.
somebody comes to us,
Yeah.
you'd probably want 3 months lead in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
So, alright, yeah.
So just going back to 19, the fees,
Mm.
are members happy with the proposed fees? These are what we've used before.
There's a caveat there that the
Yeah.
fees are under review as part of the wider piece of work. So this isn't about setting any fees.
Yeah,
sure. Okay.
This is just about the actual narrative in
Yeah.
terms of conditions.
Okay.
Can I just check, these are our current fees, are they?
Yes.
Okay.
The current fees. Okay, so any other comments on this?
So yes, well, the question of the deposit, the amount,
Mm.
Yeah. So the very last,
so my suggestion would be, and it's whether
Yeah.
it's supported, it's £250 deposit.
Mhm.
I think anything less than that is,
Could I just
yeah,
confirm that includes the charities and the CIOs are still responsible for it?
I think so.
Yeah.
That's my suggestion.
So in
That
all
doesn't sound
cases,
unreasonable to me, but.
in all cases, £250. But above that, it says 150 for a half day, small commercial event half day.
That's a higher fee.
So this is for the whole forecourt.
Deposit.
No, the deposit is an insurance policy against damage being incurred. So
Oh, I see, sorry, it says £75, £150,
those are the higher
deposit.
fees.
plus a deposit.
Mm.
So, yeah, £250 seems a reasonable figure. Or not?
They'll be refunded if
Yeah.
there's
Yeah,
no
if there's
damage.
no issues, it's
Yeah.
refunded.
Mm.
And you could make it £1,000 and it's, some of these groups might not.
Brave man.
Look, if they can write a check, they don't have to bank the check, return the check back to them, you see, the money will come
Do we
out.
still accept checks?
Are we accepting checks?
Sorry?
Do you accept checks?
Yes, there's still.
So are you happy with £250 in that final paragraph?
Well, it's the 10th of the cost of a deep clean, if I understand.
It would be.
Yes.
Mm.
Seems reasonable.
So the decision required is to agree these revised terms of hire and to agree a figure of £250 for the deposit to be charged.
Yeah.
Is that,
So if that could go into the guidance as the proposal of discussion at STC.
so anyone wishes to propose these and that figure? I'm happy to propose them.
I'll second it.
Councillor Black, all those in favour? So that's agreed unanimously. Thank Thank you. Anything else on that? So the next one is priorities, terms of reference, status and action log for Finance and General Purposes Committee. Town Clerk to share the priorities update for F and GP Committee that's been amalgamated with terms of reference, status and action log. Committee to debate the priorities, close out the actions completed and to potentially remove, merge any items no longer relevant. And this is attachment 5. Now my first thought on looking through this is it's much too long.
Yeah.
We have lots of things in there which are completed, which need to come out. I'm not sure about all the terms of reference being in there, to be frank. I think we have terms of reference for this committee. Do we need to be reviewing them at every meeting? What we should be doing is saying these are the terms of reference at year beginning, and at the year end we have maybe like an appraisal report to say to what degree have we adhered to. And
I think Councillor Green who
yeah, it was.
suggests that.
So, any thoughts on this?
So I think Councillor Green's point was about keeping the terms of reference clearly in view to test ourselves that we're doing what the committee is here to do, and it's a reasonable challenge to set. But I don't think it should turn into a process of review at each meeting in terms of reference. They are signed off at the start. Your suggestion, Councillor Larser, that at the end of the year we could then do a review, but every member of this group has the opportunity to put their hand up in a meeting and say, actually, there is a terms of reference bullet that we're not meeting. That's our role.
I agree, we shouldn't be doing it at every meeting, but it may make sense to do it every 6 months, because if you leave for a whole year,
Yes.
you've lost that year.
Yeah.
At least if you do it the 6 month one, it allows you the second half of the financial year to pick up things that you were unable to address first time round. And I'd be ready to propose something like that rather than only once a year. We need to set them every year, clearly, or review them every year. But if you do a quick review every 6 months,
I think I'd be happy with that. So October and March, April. So mid-year in line with the budget review, and then at end of the year appraise
I'm happy to propose that as an amendment.
As an amendment?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll second that. Those in favour?
Remember that?
So those can all come out.
Come out.
Okay. Is there anything on page 1 that we need to look at in any depth? I think the ones where it says completed need to come out.
Yep.
A lot of these are to do with the working group, which we discussed already. Are you happy for the town clerk to take this away, perhaps work on it with myself, and just to try and slim it down, simplify it, and bring it back to the next meeting? Is that
Second.
acceptable? All those in favour? You happy with that?
Yeah.
That's right. Thank you. Any questions? Sorry, Bob. Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. Would you then keep a separate list of completed agendas rather than, it would be on
We
the
should.
You should,
rather than
yeah.
have to trawl back and
Yeah.
in case things come up again?
Yeah, so maybe we could have a active and a closed
Completed,
action
yeah,
list.
yeah.
So active as in not yet finished or in progress, and then that could come into the year-end review where we're saying, we've done this achievements over the year. Yeah, I think it's a good point because we need to know what we've done. Otherwise they can easily be forgotten. Okay, so all happy with that?
Very happy. Very happy.
Okay, thank you for that. Next is item 9, assets update, STC assets. Committee is to receive a report from the property manager with an update and proposal for the Boatman's Hill Chapel. Members to note the report and to form recommendations for council. Decision required. This is attachment 6. So Julian has set out some options for the chapel. I think some of us have been to see the building. You'll know that it sits in the middle of Boatman's Hill Chapel. It's just a single room. It does have electricity. It does have water. It doesn't have water outside. It doesn't have a toilet. But what he's uncovered in the documents, now I'm assuming this is the transfer from DDC, the sale to, I'm not sure how much it was sold to STC for. Was it like £1?
Sorry, I don't have that information.
Anyway, whatever. But there's a covenant in there which says, in the 3rd schedule, it can only be used as a chapel. No trade or business is allowed under the covenants, which effectively makes it worthless and unusable. So the question Julian is asking is, do we sell it? Do we try to overcome the covenants? What's the best way forward? Any thoughts on this?
I don't know much about covenants and what the likelihood are in terms of getting it, the process would be, and the likelihood of them being agreed to be done. There's a matter of cost implications. I don't know.
Well, you
Could
can
be explored, couldn't it?
You can appeal to the land tribunal, and he set out the fees there. I think there's another way forward, which is to go to DDC and seek a deed of release for the covenant, because I don't know what date this covenant is from. Presumably it's 50 or 100 years old, but clearly it's a very, very restrictive covenant which effectively stops the building being used for anything. So you could argue that it's unduly restrictive, go to them and seek a release of that covenant to say it can be used for wider uses with their consent.
Yeah, that was my starting point. I think we need to engage with DDC, the relevant officer in relation to that, to get further detail. First of all, I just wanted to thank, if you pass on thanks to Julian for the work that he's done. I think it's an excellent piece. The one thing I'm struggling a little bit with is the fact that we need to really take a portfolio view of our assets, and this proposes using the sale of an item to then be used for one other asset, and I'm not convinced we should do it in piecemeal fashion, because the separate Fishergate is being progressed, and we still don't know the likely journey that needs to complete. So I accept the proposal from him as a good way of presenting an idea, but I think there's a bit more work to do, and including going to DDC on the release from the covenant.
I agree with that. I think with that covenant, it probably has a negative value, because who would buy it, and then you have to look after it and restore it and maintain it. So it wouldn't release any funds. So the way forward is to find out if we can overturn the covenant, and then make a decision about retain or sell. And if you can retain, if the use could be extended to include a stonemason's building or a storage building or an artist studio or something of that sort, then it would achieve a rental income.
It's not a facetious question, but does the term cover use as a chapel, is that purely for Christianity? Because we're in a much more of a multi-faith society. Are there small groups from different faiths who would be able to use it, even though the term might not be a chapel as we recognise, as most of us would recognise? It isn't a facetious point, it's a serious point.
Well, the phrase "otherwise than as a chapel," what does it mean? What is a
I think
chapel?
if we hit it
Yeah,
on
A
the
chapel
nail
could
there.
be
Yes.
a pub or
Yes.
a bar or
The chapel.
A trust.
it doesn't really have a
That's
great
good.
it doesn't have a great deal of meaning, doesn't it? So that, I think that's why we need to speak to DDC or even a solicitor to get advice about
Okay.
whether this covenant can be overcome.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just going to make a quick point that with the change of use of so many churches now, I wouldn't have actually imagined there would be a problem. Because with the Church Preservation Society, so
Yeah.
many of them are now repurposed, aren't
Yes,
they?
yeah.
Like to you know,
Yeah.
St Mary's and St Peter's in Sandwich.
Yeah.
So when that was set, that covenant,
Yeah.
that wouldn't have been the case. So
Yes.
yeah, it'd be hard to find an objection with that precedent.
I don't know what the ecclesiastical issue is. Is it, what's the word when a church is consecrated? Is
Deconsecrate.
it consecrated or
Deconsecrate, yeah.
deconsecrated? I don't know.
I mean, I share Councillor Tucker's view that we're not ready to decide on this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So my proposal is that we thank Julian for this report, really good background and proposals, but that we request that he speak to DDC, who were the seller of the property, to say, look, this covenant is unduly restrictive. We wish to talk to you or negotiate with you about whether we can agree a deed of release to dispose of the covenant and allow, with your consent, other uses for that property. So I'll propose that. Do we have a second? All those in favour? So that's the way forward at this stage, and then once that's been determined, we can come back and decide what to do. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Right, so that's the last item. Date and time of the next meeting is the 20th November 2024. Thank you very much.
Okay.